What's going on, everybody? Thank you for giving your time to join me. Before we jump into the episode, I want to remind you to let me know what you think. I do this to bring what I think is interesting or misunderstood or unappreciated to everyone, and I'm always curious what you have to say about it. I like criticisms and compliments, so feel free to be blunt. Same goes for ratings and such. If you enjoy some or all of the work, just click some number of stars that reflects that, if you would. There's also Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. I'm on all of them at The Best Idea, YouTube. I'm still branching out. I recently started writing articles and publishing them on Substack under The Best Idea. The link will be in the notes for the show for all these things. That writing may or may not be on topics that we cover here, so have a look. The first two articles, just to give you an idea, one's like a formal essay about a topic we covered, not letting kids under 21 on social media. And the other one was a little more fun. It's like a how-to article on manipulation, which was a lot of fun to write. So I think you'll enjoy it. The Patreon page is still the most direct way to support what I'm doing. There's 2 levels there. $3 a month get you first dibs on Stop the Presses episodes. And I'm working on a few other perks to add to that tier. And then there's just $1, the tip bucket. I spent the majority of my career in the service industry, so I understand the value of a tip. If you're not familiar with Patreon, it's extremely easy to access and set up. And any one of those things or all of those things that you do would be very much appreciated. Again, thank you for being here, and here we go. Welcome back, everybody. The Best Idea Podcast. I'm Stephen Cochran, and it has come to my attention that there is a really sick fucking game going on in the foster care system in our country. So, I mean, first of all, it's bad enough that we have so many kids in foster care or up for adoption. There's over 400,000 kids in foster care, living with a family member, family friend if they're lucky, if not, a foster family. Just a group of strangers who I'm sure are well-meaning for the most part, but to the kid, just a group of strangers. Or, the worst, living in some government facility, just with other kids. That orphan Annie sort of thing. So, as an at-bat, is a bad situation. And sometimes these kids are removed from their houses and put into foster care. And there's good reason to do that at times. If parents are a real piece of shit. Not just your run-of-mill, not a thrill to have around type of people. Parents that just, don't do a great job in your opinion, or aren't as attentive as they could be, or aren't as smart as they could be, or don't make a lot of money to provide things. I mean, if they're hitting the basics, you let that kid stay where he's at. But then you have the real pieces of shit that are, viciously abusive, deeply into hard drugs like heroin or meth, real alcoholics. We could probably all agree that there are definitely standards that we shouldn't allow kids to fall beneath. If both of your parents are hardcore meth addicts, the state should probably step in and take you out of that house, and at the very least put you into a house where there aren't meth addicts. It may not be a perfect home that they stick you in, I'm sure it's not, but probably going to be better. But what about just for being poor? What if it's just for poverty? What if that is the only thing you're, quote, doing wrong as a parent? You're just too poor. Should a parent lose their kids for being poor? Now, however you answer that question, we as a society have kind of answered it. We have programs for this. We have benefits that just come with citizenship. Because what we all agree on is that it's never the kid's fault, right? I mean, no matter why that family's too poor to afford food or housing or stable housing or what have you, maybe you're a person that thinks that shit's too expensive and it makes sense that those things can't be afforded, or that wages are too low and that those things can't be afforded. Maybe you think that everybody on those benefit plans is just fucking lazy. Either way, doesn't matter. It's certainly not the kid's fault. That is where we all agree. So we pay this money. And it's not just a federal program. It's not, the federal government. People have a real antipathy towards the federal government doing benefits. These are mostly state programs. They take federal money and they spend it. We're going to talk about that in a second. But these are run by the state. But that is why we have these programs. So no matter what you actually think about whether or not we should have them, we do have them. So I think we all have a little bit of a stake in kind of thinking about how they operate and how that money is spent. At the end of the day, it's your fucking money. So we pay, meaning whatever you pay to the federal government, if anything, goes towards helping keeping food in the fridge and a roof over their heads. And it's the basic stuff. You've seen, the EBT cards and public housing and stuff like this. It is the basics. The feds pay the states with this money in what they call block grants. The federal government takes in all the taxes, some $3-4 trillion in a year, and they send it out to the states in different ways. And one of those ways is called a block grant, which is just getting a check, no strings attached. They tell the state, here is the money, here's kind of what we'd like you to do with it, but we're not going to require that you do anything like that with it. You get the check, no real conditions. You spend it how you see fit. And I think most of us take that to mean that, these large sums of money are either being sent straight to poor families or poor single parents to help them with poverty. That was my assumption, is that the arguments for or against these programs, that's basically what these programs are doing, taking hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars and sending checks out or paying people's rent or putting money on people's SNAP program card, something like that. Well, lo and behold, that is not the fucking case. So if I said that it isn't 100% of the money that's collected, tax money that's collected, if I told you that it wasn't 100% of that money going to people that needed it, okay? So we know it's not all of it. And that kind of makes sense. There's going to be administrative costs and there's going to be bullshit. It's the government. What percent would you guess is actually being paid to help people? What percent would you think it was? Like 90? 75? Well, bless your heart. The number's 22. 22% of the money that is supposed to help poor people, only 22% of it actually goes to those people. So imagine you're dead fucking broke, okay? Like living on 10, 12 grand a year broke. Not, making $40,000, $50,000 and you live by yourself and you can't afford to go, you live with, your family and you can't afford to go on like extra vacations and shit. You'll have to excuse the dog. He might see something. But 10, 12 grand a year. Nobody is better equipped than you to know what you lack on a day-to-day basis. So if someone's going to help, the smart thing might just be to give you the money. I'm not saying every welfare benefit recipient is going to be Warren Buffett with their fucking checks, but it is the best of ideas for how to help. The exact opposite is to do nothing. So we spend money to do something, and most of us then believe that these people have no room left to complain because they get this help. It's what you hear about, since the 80s. We're about welfare queens, and they're just out there spending checks and blah, blah, blah. So here we are thinking, well, we pay this fucking money, and we see the program. There it is. It's supposed to be helping these people. Why are you not on top of it? Why can't you get your shit together? Like, their lives are not going to be perfect, but we're doing what we can. The success now is on you. You could put it on the other person. Well, I'm helping. But then the reality is that that's all bullshit. We spend the money, but it doesn't go to the people that it's supposed to help. In fact, as I have discovered through some very inquisitive reporters, is that most of the states are punishing people for being poor. Many folks, they blame the poor for their own situation. You may be one of them listening to this now. Poor people are lazy, they got drug problems, they're mentally disabled, a whole bunch of not my problem type of thing. But being poor as a consequence is bad enough. We don't need to layer consequences on top of that. You know what I mean? If you live in poverty, that is harsh enough. We don't need to lay, judgment and punishment with that. And I guess more specifically what I mean is we don't need to take your kids away. Like the state, they'll take your fucking kids for being poor. Like being bad at making money doesn't mean that you're a bad parent. There's a lot of hard workers that get caught up in shit jobs because it's all they know is the work ethic part. They never learn about self-worth and valuing your time and what is possible and how to capitalize or even see opportunities and where you should go to find those opportunities because they don't just end up on people's fucking laps. There are plenty of people like that work their fucking ass off. They work 40 to 80 hours a week just getting it in at 2 or 3 jobs. All they know is the work ethic part. They may not know how or don't see a way to get a better job or start their own business. It's just not how they were brought up. So if you're not good at operating in our marketplace, not only will you be denied the little luxuries in life, like a decent apartment, good food, the good stuff. Not only that, but the state will come and take your fucking kids. You can be an attentive, loving, supportive mother who adores her children. And if you make less than 20 grand a year, you can lose your son. Like, not only will they take your son, this is what blew my fucking mind. Not only will they take your son, they take him and they charge you for it. I don't mean charges like charge you with a crime. They send you a fucking bill. Let me repeat that. The state will take a child from a person for being too poor and then bill that poor person for the cost of the state keeping the kid. Now again, let me just remind you that all states, every single one of them, is given money by the federal government. We, as a country, give each state money to pay for this shit. Maybe you're asking yourself, didn't we just establish that? Federal government, welfare, all that. And the states still charge the parents. So you work 2 jobs, both minimum wage. You can't get child care that you can trust because either you have nobody to help or there isn't anything around you. It's not like people that are trustworthy and willing to watch your 6-year-old are just coming out of the fucking woodwork and randomly calling through the phone book. Hey, just by the way, I didn't know if, maybe you needed some child care. It's not how it works. Anybody with kids knows that. You have to go find a place. You have to vet it out. You got to make sure the people that work in there aren't scumbags. Or you have to have a family friend or a personal friend who's got nothing else to do themselves. So you can't find anything. So your 12-year-old has to stay in your trailer by herself for a few hours. And then the state finds out about the situation. Maybe somebody at the school says something, however it happens. Do they show up and ask you how they can be of assistance? Do they knock on the door of the trailer and offer you help, get you a better place to live, get you some vouchers to pay for bus fare, something to help you get childcare? No, they'll take your fucking daughter and they leave you an invoice. It turns out like that in most states, actually. If they deem you unfit as a parent, they take your kid. It costs you money every month. Sometimes it's $25 a month. Sometimes it's $100 a month. Sometimes it's $150 a month. It doesn't really fucking matter how much it is, because the whole point of taking that kid is you said the parent was too poor in the first place. It's not because these parents are out there doing meth or drinking with their fucking 6-year-olds. A lot of times it's because the only housing that they can afford is very fucking substandard. And the kids have to stay home with the oldest in charge because sometimes their mom hasn't finished her second shift at her third fucking job. So you're too poor. Now, imagine the trauma associated with having some fucking strangers in shitty suits come and take you from your house and your family. It's immeasurable. There's a story done by ProPublica that I'll attach in the show notes for this, among some other ones. ProPublica and NPR did very good on this. NPR, as a side note, NPR is known as kind of a left-wing organization, and you can think that it is, actually. I'll agree with that. ProPublica, on the other hand, if you are ever looking to put your money to work in non-biased, useful, helpful journalism, ProPublica is exactly where you need to give your money to. This organization does absolutely phenomenal work. And a story done by them lays out one such example. One such mom, Ariana Bermudez, had a son named David, 2 years old. She moved to Arizona because where she lived, where she was born in California, was too expensive. And she had to come out of the orphanage system there herself. And so she wanted to get out. So Arizona, she goes there. Apparently, she gets there. Pretty rough to make ends meet there, too. And as soon as she gets there, she applied for welfare. And she gets approved. Now, before I tell you what she got approved for, I want you to do a quick rundown of all your bills in your mind. Whether you got kids or not, doesn't matter. Actually, if you don't have kids, it's even better. And try and extract the extras, the entertainment and all that stuff. Try and just go basics. Rent, food, shelter, clothes, that sort of stuff. What do you spend? Because what they gave her was $200. $200 a month. So do your bills in your head. You got them? Just a short list. Which one of them is covered by $200? My electric bill is barely covered some months by $200 a month. Fucking barely. So she worked 3 jobs. What else is she supposed to do? She's got a kid and she's got work ethic. So she worked 3 jobs. Then after she gets a few payments of this magical $200, they stop paying her. So she gets approved. She gets her $200. She decides, well, that ain't fucking enough. So she gets a job. That job ain't enough. She gets another job. That job plus the other job plus the $200 ain't enough. So she gets a third job. So between the 3 jobs, now, guess what? She makes too much money. She makes too much fucking money because she's working 3 jobs. So they take the $200 away. This is not only is it insulting to hand a single mom who's got the guts to raise her kid on her own, accept the life that she's made for herself. She's got her son, and just fucking grind and handle it. 3 jobs in. I don't give a shit if it's 3 of the easiest jobs in the world, most menial labor. It doesn't matter to me what it is. 3 jobs, and they take the $200 because she makes too much money now. In 1 calendar year in Arizona, they denied 3,700 out of 4,200 applications for welfare. So they cut off her $200. And she's still got to find a fucking babysitter. She's got to find a babysitter that she can afford. And she does, luckily, somehow. And brings her son there for a while. But then it turns out, babysitter's a fucking pervert. Apparently David told his mom, this was a couple of years on, that the babysitter had been touching him. So he told her this when she wasn't far from the babysitter's house. And she, like a good mom, flips her shit. Completely fucking lost it. And I guess tried to get in the place to go after the person because the police were called. And she's in hysterics. Clearly. It's not the best look, I guess, but I ask anyone to consider what they might do in that situation, okay? Close your eyes. You pick your child up. They tell you they've been molested. You go in that fucking house is what you do. Anyway. So Bermuda spent a night in jail, and then the state decided that she needed to be investigated. That maybe her emotional state was not good enough by their standards to have a child. I mean, imagine the sort of person it would take to make that judgment of somebody else. But that's what they did. So for 6 months, they took her son. This young kid. No child abuse, no neglect. She was just poor. She had a bad night, and she was poor. And they made this woman take an IQ test, checked for mental retardation, humiliated her. She was asked if she binge eats or if she gets, quote unquote, too sexual. Humiliated her. What the fuck are we doing? Now, this story comes out of Arizona. This is not the only place that this sort of shit happens. So after 6 months, she gets him back. The article talks about, as anyone would expect, that this kid is really fucked up over this situation. He thinks his mom abandoned him. Why wouldn't he think that? He gets taken away in this car, and all he can do is look back and wonder, like, why is my mom not coming to get me? Nobody's going to explain to this kid any of the nuance of this situation. Well, your mommy's working on her IQ test right now. She would be here if she could, but she wants to. So what the fuck are you going to tell him? What could you possibly tell him that's going to convince him, oh, you're okay, that makes sense. My mom does love me. She didn't leave me here. You guys took me, and this is all happening. It'll be better in a while. Okay, I'll see my mom in a couple of months. 6 months. She gets him back. I mean, he has trouble. She talks about how he has trouble sleeping, and he questions whether she really loves him at all. That he's constantly testing her, asking her things, doing things so that she can prove to him that she's not going to leave. Because she was fucking poor. That's it. If she had gotten $600 consistently, this shit never would have happened. If she had gotten $600 instead of $200, none of this would have happened. How much fucking cheaper can it get to help a family? It isn't like they don't have the money. In fact, Arizona is a state that spends most of its welfare money on child protective services. So, I just laid out all the benefits that, we've kind of agreed on, most of us, that we want families to have when they're in poverty, food assistance, just money, just give them fucking money. They will pay their rent, they will buy food. Obviously, they're people, they're reasonable enough. Just give them the fucking money. But what Arizona does with its money is something like 60% of it goes to investigating and charging the parents that they're supposed to be helping. The money that's supposed to help the poor people gets spent prosecuting the poor people for being poor. In the same article, they go into what the states do with this money, all of them. Some of them use it to fund anti-abortion programs or fucking Christian summer camps. Mississippi used $1 million to pay Brett Favre to come to a couple of speeches about poverty. Think of that. $1 million spent to pay a rich person to talk about poverty in one of the poorest states in the country. And the money they used to pay him was supposed to go to the poor people. And if they don't spend it on stupid shit, they save it. Like Tennessee. Tennessee has $800 million in the bank. All welfare money. Hawaii's got 400 in the bank. Alabama's got 100. Why Alabama is fucking stockpiling welfare money for a rainy day, I don't know. They're usually in an argument between them, Mississippi, and Louisiana for the poorest, stupidest, fattest place in the country. And that's coming from somebody that lives in Louisiana, so I can say shit like that. all saved welfare money that is intended to help people in that state. And that is all disgusting. But, unfortunately, it is not the worst part of this story, this little foster care story. So imagine a kid goes into an orphanage, okay? Let's say it's a young boy, and his parents can't take care of him anymore. Let's be more specific. Let's say that the boy's father is in prison, okay, for murdering his mother. All right? This is not actually a made-up story. There's a kid named Mateo Jaime who this happened to. He ended up in foster care when he was 15 because his father murdered his mother in their house. So, Jaime moved in with a relative in Alaska. He was raised in Texas, but he had a relative in Alaska. And he lived there for a little while, but eventually he ended up in foster care. And it says that Jaime was passionate about playing the cello. He'd been preparing to audition for the All-State Orchestra right before the murder happened. While he was in there, he was owed benefit money from his mom dying. A couple $100s a month, actually, that the feds pay you for a death benefit. The state foster care system applied for that money for him in his stead and took it. I don't know if I'm explaining this right, so I just want to make sure that I'm clear. This kid goes into the foster care system. One of his parents has died, and he is owed a benefit from the federal government, a couple $100s a month. I think it's $700 a month he was owed. Unbeknownst to him, he was 15 when this happened. The state, applied for this benefit for him, okay, without his permission. Now, granted, he's underage. I understand that. But without his knowledge. And proceeds to take the money. And they don't put it away in a savings account or a mutual fund or something for him when he gets out of there to help him start his life. They take it. And they use it to pay the cost of keeping him. Now, maybe your mind is wandering back to a minute ago when we had a nice, long, detailed discussion about how that shit is paid for already. It is not as though if they didn't take this money from this kid, they wouldn't be able to pay for the bills of the foster care system. That's not how that would work. Those bills would be paid. But they instead decided to take this money from this kid. And I wish with everything inside of me that this was a one-off story. But in every state, I shit you not, I don't care what state you live in, every single state does this. There is story after story. There is Alex Carter, 21, $721 every month for 2 years, state took from her. Ethan Harvey, 20 years old, $700 to $1,000 a month, starting when he was 16. His mom died, and he was in the foster care system in Alaska too, actually. There are companies that are hired by states that make all of their money by applying for these sorts of benefits for these foster kids so that the state can take the money. Like, they go so far as to look at private healthcare records, caseworker notes, school performance, and other things to see if these kids have PTSD or depression or anxiety or any other mental health issues so that they can be classified as having that emotional disability so that more benefits can be claimed. One of these companies is called Maximus, and the vice president for marketing and public relations, his name is James Dunn, and he said in a statement, quote, that the company's success in helping connect foster children with these benefits is not only a success for the child, but also for the caseworkers who are freed up to focus on the day-to-day well-being of these vulnerable children, and for the state or government agency paying for services that keep foster children safe, secure, and cared for. It is bad enough to be poor. It is bad enough to end up in foster care. This is needless trauma on top of that. And it happens in every single fucking state. There really isn't much that I can think of right now more stomach turning than this as soon as I found out about it. So I wanted to bring it to your attention. If you're somebody that keeps up with the things happening in your state, look into this. See if this is something that your state does. And maybe make a short phone call, send a short email to let whoever is in charge of this agency in your state know how absolutely revolted you are to this idea. And talk about things that need to change now. This is number one and number two amongst them. Not the cheeriest of stories, but I appreciate you hearing it through with me. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.